knowledgeable brother. Everybody, it's Kimmy here. I just want to say hi. How are you doing and stuff? And welcome back to another episode of KimYaps. It's low-key been a minute since I've done a solo episode, which mostly has to do with, the regular trials and tribulations of life. Whether it be moving around, just like going through certain things. And one thing that's been, I would say, like prevalent across my mind is how I've been speaking to myself in these seasons of not quite uncertainty, but imbalance, I would say. And you may be like, okay, what does this imbalance feel like, or how can I relate to this? The imbalance of having a plan, having a structure, but not feeling like you're in the right spot to execute it, or rather are doing the right execution, material things, right? And often when we get to these points in our life where we're like, okay, I'm here, we're doing the thing, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, boom, we often go into this, what I call a cycle of delusion when it comes to negativity. And most people will be like, oh, this delusion comes from thinking you can even achieve these goals that you're talking about, woo, but it really comes from the part of your brain that is meant to protect you. And this thing, or rather this phenomenon, is known as doubt, right? And doubt shows up in many ways, and may show up in how you walk, how you talk, what cologne you wear that day. Did I do this or did I do that correctly? The second guessing, the judgmental nature of the human brain. And when we're in those patterns, or rather those seasons of doubt, we can often turn our mouths not against other people, but ourselves. Perhaps even against other people first and then ourselves, because of this doubt that we face. And this episode is probably going to be titled, hopefully I remember it, The Power of the Tongue. And as we know from our Christian foundation and in the ways that we live, talking about James 3 and the power of the tongue, how it has the power of life and death. And I was just thinking about how there are other ways where we use this power of the tongue and we don't acknowledge it how we should, right? Because even when we think about potential, we see people that ruin the gifts that God has given them, not with talent, not with like appearance, not with even with money and things like that, but shoot, not even devil jumping out the closet. It's always the mouth. It's the way that they talk. It's the way that we speak when we get nervous. It's the way that we speak when we're proud. It's the way we speak when we feel disrespected. The way we speak when we feel lonely. Even the way we speak when we feel powerful. And that is just going along with the title of this episode, because I think people usually look at the tongue, or rather the gift of the tongue, as the gift, right? And when we characterize gift, or when we bring it into the scope of our minds, we usually think something loud, something grand, something public, or like for those of us that grew up in that black church setting, something churchy, like right, something that receives applause. But what I'm talking about is the gift of the speech itself, the ability to shape a room, to shape your life, to shape your relationships, to shape your future by what you release out of your mouth. So, on a personal note, I've seen not myself talk me out of things, but there have been times where I've been doing tasks, or there was moments where I was like, "Oh, I want to do this, this, and this," but I would be in the back of my mind like, "Do I really feel like I want to do this? Do I think this is even going to do this?" And eventually, talking myself out of doing the thing at all. So in a way, like talking myself out of uh, doing those things that could have benefited me. And those benefits could have been a connection. It could have been a possible deal. It could have been so many things. And it just ends up being me talking my way into a spiral, talking recklessly and then acting surprised when the consequences arrive, like a receipt for something I bought. And who do we know? Or who's the most famous user of words? God. But God is often not a man, but he's often in very few words, simple words that show up in ways to steady us, to correct us, to heal us, to warn us, to call us back to the places that we may have been needed, or the spaces that we may have left because we didn't believe in ourselves enough to be there, right? So, in my mind, or in like my mind's eye, there are three lanes of the tongue. So, one, we have the tongue as a weapon. Two, we have the tongue as a steering wheel. And three, we have the tongue as worship and as witness. And in reality, if your words are a mess, your life will start looking like a mess too. So let's go to the most valuable resource that we have when it comes to the spiritual meaning of those words, right? So, James chapter 3. James describes the tongue as being small, but it can set a whole forest on fire. He talks about how we can tame animals, but the tongue is harder to tame. He describes it as a fire, a deadly poison. And in that, he's not trying to be Shakespearean or melodramatic. He's describing what we have all seen as a product of the tongue. I mean, one of the great thinkers and people that I looked up to for years, Tupac. Loved Tupac. And he was one of the main proprietors, or the main people that you can look at and be like, oh, this is what happens when you use your tongue for good. This is what happens when you use your tongue for other things. Because as great as he was, Tupac spoke a lot of life into things, but he coincidentally spoke death unto himself. Another shout out to Don Illuminati, the 7-Day Theory, right? And we've seen it. We've seen somebody lose everything over 10 seconds of talking. One rant, one voice note, one comment, one I'm just being honest, one I don't care, one oh, this is an unwanted opinion, and now you've burned bridges, trust is gone, and your reputation is stained. But James also uses this image of the tongue, which I love, because it's practical, right? He says the tongue is like a bit in a horse's mouth. The horse is strong, big body, strong legs, but a small bit steers the whole animal. That would be you, your big dreams, or your strong body, big plans, big future. And a small thing, your mouth, can steer the whole direction of your trajectory, not just for in the moments that you have, but for your whole life. But another thing James does is he says like it's like a rudder on a ship, And again, the ship is huge, but the rudder is small. And what does the rudder do? Turns it. So when you say my words don't matter or they don't carry weight or what I have to say can't contribute to the conversation, you're lying to yourself because your words matter more than you want them to. So, in talking about those lanes of the tongue, let's go to the first one, the tongue as a weapon. So, some people, they talk like there's always a competition, right? Every conversation is a contest, every disagreement is a chance to dominate. So they sharpen the words, like how people in the medieval ages sharpened their swords, right? And they know where to cut to. They know what you're sensitive about. They know what you're ashamed of. They know your history. They know the little insecurity you told them in a vulnerable moment. And when they get mad, what do they reach for? Boom. They reach for the most damaging sentence, the thing that they know will cut you at your knees, not to address how they feel, not to even bring some kind of satisfaction to their situation, but to punish you. And some people carry this as a form of strength, but it's a form of immaturity that has the appearance of a god, if we will, right? And if I'm honest, I've had to check myself there because when I speak, I mean, I've always been kind of like laid back, kind of soft spoken, but the human inclination to punish those that you have done you wrong, or to be in a sense, God, the the one who judges and who rules over and who says this and that. I have an inclination to be judge, jury, and executioner sometimes in my speech, right? And even in things like sarcasm, like sometimes I can speak like I'm above you, like again, like I'm judging, you're defended. And sometimes that can make a person feel small with a different level of precision, right? But what the Holy Spirit will do is oppress you on that because you can't pray for more love while you practice verbal violence, right? You can't ask God, oh, Lord, please bless me with relationships while you use your mouth to poison them. Again, we'll go back to the words of Solomon. Proverbs 12:18 he says, reckless words are like a sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. And that's what we're supposed to pray. It's a real split, if you will. Piercing, healing, sword, medicine. So you have to ask yourself when you speak, do people feel cut or do they feel cared for? And I'm not saying you can't correct people, because correct them. Correct them. Right? I'm not saying that you can't set boundaries. What I am saying is that the spirit behind how you speak or the intentions of your speech matters, right? Because people can feel when your goal is love and people can feel when your goal is control. So most of us learned how to weaponize words as protection. Maybe in your house growing up, whoever talked the loudest won, whoever talked the meanest survived, whoever had the sharpest tongue didn't get messed with. So you grew teeth in your mouth. You became a Wolverine, if you will. You became quick. You became witty. You were quick on your feet because you had to be in a house where people would try to catch you slipping. So you became buoyant. You were in a constant state of being on a jump rope. You became dangerous with your language because you always felt like you were in the danger zone. But in those transitions to adulthood, we forget that we have to let go of some of those old ideologies or that old theology that we used to have. And in that, we have to realize that, yes, those things can still be valuable and they can still be useful, but using them in the real world will only make you dig a deeper pit of that generational curse in your family than you already have. And by continuing those traits of always being in defiance, always having to react, always having to act when there's a moment to step back and let things be, creates this overwhelming loop within your family, and that will eventually be passed on to your children, though that may have been the thing that you hated the most about your parents. Right? And we keep on doing these same cycles of things, whether it being judgment, whether it being this, whether it being that. And it's this weird kind of love-hate relationship that you'll have with your parents based on the things that they do. And then you'll find yourself doing the same thing. You'll be like, oh, this thing kind of works. Let me keep on doing this. Let me keep on doing that. And then you eventually have your kids and be like, I still got to do this thing because I got to survive in this world. And then you will watch how the loop will continue over and over and over again. And then you'll realize, maybe God made me the one who was supposed to be the curse breaker in my family. Maybe God made me the one who was supposed to stop this line of using my words as a weapon instead of as a tool for healing. And then by that time, it'll be too late. So, this is part one. I'll record some more parts later, but I have a meeting to get to. So, God bless, keep the faith, and remember, Jesus loves you.